We're going to check out some round 2 draft targets for Atlanta at quarterback. But first, I don't want to know who your dream pick is. I want to know who your nightmare pick is. If you were in the Falcons war room, who would you stand on the table to say, do not take this guy? I've got my answer. I'll save that for the show, but let me know in the comment section. And also, quick shout out to Adam Shadix for supporting and sponsoring today's show with his generous contributions during our live show, which airs every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Let's talk round 2 quarterback targets for Atlanta, because as fun as it might be to envision the Falcons picking a quarterback in round 1, I think we do have to address the very real possibility that that's just not plausible, right? At least not for one of the top 3 quarterbacks. I expect the top 3 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, to all go in the top 3, at max the top 4, meaning if the Patriots were to shock everyone and go Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe the Cardinals trade that 4th overall pick, and maybe Atlanta jumps up, but maybe someone else beats them to it. So let's just talk about, I wouldn't even say doomsday necessary, but let's talk about quarterbacks Atlanta could get in round 2 if their top guys are gone by the time they're on at the clock at pick number 8, and they don't want to reach too early on one of these quarterbacks, and they play it safe with a Dallas Turner or a Malik Neighbors type of selection. So let's get started with the Washington Huskies quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. You already know the other 2 guys we'll talk about, but we'll go quarterback by quarterback. So Penix, of course, comes off a phenomenal season for Washington, leading them to the national championship game. And he's 6'3", 213 pounds. He's a bit older. He's going to turn 24 years old in May. So look at it through the lens of when his rookie contract is up after 5 seasons, he'll be almost 30 years old by the time he gets his 2nd contract. That's going to make some teams a little weary, but if he's a great quarterback, no one's going to have much of an issue. Now, he's known for his rock-solid arm and downfield accuracy, but he tends to ignore the safe passes, right? He's always looking for the big play, and that's worked out for him a lot, but sometimes it's good to just take what the defense gives you. Now, the biggest concern with Penix isn't actually anything to do with his play. I would say it's more about his injury history, because you go back to his 4 years in Bloomington, Indiana, where all 4 seasons with the Hoosiers, he suffered a season-ending injury. 2018, torn ACL. 2019, right shoulder injury. 2020, torn ACL. 2021, left shoulder injury. And remember, he's a lefty, so that's his throwing shoulder. So teams are obviously going to have a lot of medical questions for Penix going into the combine. Team doctors are going to evaluate him. It's kind of weird to talk about, but once we come out of that, we'll have a much better picture if teams believe, you know what, he can play, he can still go, or hey, I'm going to let you guys know right now, his tires have a lot of tread on them. I think it's worth going a different direction. So we'll revisit this once we have a better idea after the combine and pro days and things like that. But his stats speak for himself. Like, if you're not looking at the injury element here, and we're just talking about the player, he's the front runner to be the next quarterback taken after the top 3 of Caleb, Drake, and Jaden Daniels, right? What he was able to do last season at Washington, 4,900 yards, 36 touchdowns. I understand that it's not fair to compare stats from quarterback to quarterback because they play in different conferences, different teams, different everything. But at some point, you got to look at 4,900 yards and 36 touchdowns and go, hey, let's not overthink this. The guy can just play. Now, one of the things that jumps out to me the most about the 3 primary quarterbacks we're going to talk about today is the passing average, meaning how aggressive are these quarterbacks? Michael Penix averaged 13.5 yards per completion. That was 18th in FBS. J.J. McCarthy, 12.4. Bo Nix, 12.3. These might seem like minor differences, but I also think it's important to take a step further because we don't know if Michael Penix, J.J., or Bo Nix are throwing at the line of scrimmage and their guys are running 75 yards with the football, but Penix or J.J. or Bo Nix gets credit for a 75-yard touchdown throw. In reality, they threw a bubble screen. Anyone can do that. So let's look at their downfield passing for a moment. Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and J.J. McCarthy stacked up against one another on passing attempts of 20-plus yards. Penix threw 117. The next highest was Bo Nix at 51. We're talking nearly 3xing what second place did of this second-tier quarterbacks. 1,700 yards, 16 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Now, give credit to Nix and JJ. I mean, they weren't afraid. Well, they didn't throw it nearly as much as Penix did down the field, but they were a little bit more cautious with it, right? 3 combined interceptions between Nix and McCarthy on 20-plus yard passes. So I'm looking for a quarterback that isn't afraid to air it out a little bit. Because, yes, it's great to take what the defense gives you, but at some point, you're going to have to be aggressive. You're going to have to lead a team on a 2-minute drill. You're going to have to throw over the middle of the field. And I want to know that the quarterback can do that in college before they get drafted to the pros. We figure out, oh, no, they were just a check down Charlie that benefited from having great weapons in college, and that's not the case in the NFL. But pick a quarterback. Between Penix, Nix, and J.J. McCarthy, which one would you like to see Atlanta draft? Let's move on to the next round 2 quarterback target, which is J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. Now, J.J. is an interesting prospect this year because he didn't throw the ball all that much in Ann Arbor last year, but he helped his team win a national championship. Now, he's much younger than Michael Penix, right? He turned 21 years old just right after the national championship game. He's 6'3", 212 pounds. Now, the rumor on the street is he is flying up teams' big boards. GMs, scouts, evidently are starting to drool the more they watch tape of J.J. McCarthy. And every year, we get a quarterback that allegedly is flying up the draft boards. And sometimes they truly do, right? But sometimes you get Will Levis's, which we were told was going to be a first-round pick lock, and some even thought he could go round 1, like first overall round 1. Didn't happen. I wonder if JJ is this year's Will Levis, where he's going to go early in the draft, but he's not going to go round 1. Now, when you look at his stats over his 2 seasons as a starter in Michigan, they don't really wow you, and that's part of the concern for me. Like, I'm not going to use stats to completely make my opinion on a quarterback, but when I don't see enough passing attempts, period, it's tough to come to a solid decision on whether or not this guy can play at the next level, at a high level, and is worthy of becoming a franchise QB, right? And you also got to take into account what type of situation are they stepping into? Are they stepping into a spot where they can sit behind a starter and learn for a year or 2? Or are they stepping into a spot where the expectation is they're going to start sooner rather than later? I think McCarthy is a quarterback that needs a year or 2 to learn a little bit because he just didn't throw the ball enough at Michigan for me to believe he's ready to come into the NFL and spray it every single Sunday. But when we look at JJ's pros and cons, this is what I came up with. Pros are precision accuracy. I remember that one throw he had against Ohio State. He has layered some beautiful passes. He's very careful with the football, and that's something Atlanta Falcons fans need to hear because that was not the case with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. He's also a sneaky good runner. I know you might not think it, but he can move the ball well with his feet. He's got some wheels. Now, my cons for JJ, small downfield sample size, right? He had the fewest passing attempts of 20-plus yards of the 3 Tier 2 quarterbacks we looked at. There's just not enough tape out there to have a good idea as to whether or not he can make those big throws down the field. He also has a lack of touch on passes. J.J. McCarthy, if he was a pitcher, would have a 94-mile-per-hour four-seam fastball, but no changeup, like no curveball. I need to see him throw the ball with some touch, with some grace at times, and not just showing off his great arm strength, which he does have a great arm. And then finally, I'm going to go with no elite physical traits. Nothing about J.J. McCarthy's game really pops out to me as, oh my God, he's the only person on planet Earth that can make that throw right now. Just doesn't have that oomph factor, if you will. But something that is worth noting is recently Lance Zierlein dropped a round 1 mock draft. And for his selection for J.J. McCarthy, he included this. NFL evaluators have described McCarthy's processing as elite in my conversations with them. Elite. Does that sound familiar to anyone? How about Raheem Morris's introductory press conference the other day when he talks about what he's looking for in a quarterback and he opens up with elite processors? When you get those guys that are decision makers, when you get those guys who can just cut it loose and play ball and also play with great fundamental techniques, the base, the balance, the short hitches in the pocket, this is who Raheem Morris is describing. Now, Raheem Morris is going to do a lot of research over the next couple of weeks as he begins his search to find the next quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. But if multiple GMs and draft insiders are saying J.J. McCarthy, elite processor, and Raheem Morris opens up his questions about what he looks for in a quarterback by saying elite processor, it's not very difficult to connect the dots. I think this is a name to watch for in round 2. I could see Atlanta, where they currently sit with pick 43, being very aggressive on the phones to either trade up in round 2, like they did last year for Matthew Bergeron, or maybe even trade into the end of round 1. Remember when the Ravens did that? I mean, what's the big advantage between getting a guy at pick 30 versus pick 35? Pick 30 gets you a fifth-year option, 5 years of rookie contract control. Pick 35, now you got to talk about getting a new contract 1 year earlier. And so that might be the difference maker for Atlanta. If J.J. McCarthy is available towards the end of round 1, I would not be blown away. If they truly believe he's our guy, let's go up and get him after getting the best player available at pick number 8. Now, before we get on to the other quarterbacks to watch for in round 2, I want to tell you guys about our sponsor today, which is Prize Picks. We got the big game coming up on Sunday. I am putting together my menu. I'm also taking recommendations for what to have, but that's not a part of this Prize Picks read. So make sure you get started with Prize Picks today because you pick 2 to 6 players. Easy enough. Then choose more or less on their projected stats. Check. And all of a sudden, you go to Prize Picks, take the more on Patrick Mahomes' passing yards at 0.5. Guys, let me do you a solid right now. Big game on Sunday. We all know sometimes it can be a little bit tough to keep our significant others intrigued and interested for all 4 quarters. Go to Prize Picks. Download Prize Picks. Then take Patrick Mahomes' passing yards. And then pick one more. And then simply tell your significant other, hey, if this hits, we got a steak dinner on our hands. Who says no? So go download Prize Picks today when you go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. That's Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Third round 2 quarterback to watch for is Bo Nix out of Oregon, right? There are really 2 tiers of QBs, the top tier and then this next tier where everyone is still jockeying to figure out who's at the bottom and who's at the top of the second tier of quarterbacks in this year's draft class. But Bo Nix, 6'2", 217 pounds. Like Michael Penix, he's on the older side. He's going to turn 24 years old later this month, and he's got loads of experience in the college ranks. 5-year starter at Auburn and then Oregon. And I think it's just worth mentioning that Bo Nix might not have a very great or successful starting career in the National Football League, but he might go down as one of the really intriguing college football stories. Going from a true freshman at Auburn that got ran out of town, goes to Oregon, and has a tremendous career in Eugene, where he was the 7-time Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week, most in league history. I mean, there have been some incredible players that have come out of the Pac-12 on the offensive side of the football. So no matter what happens with Bo Nix, give him a lot of credit for what he was able to do to salvage his college football career, it looked like. Now, Bo Nix last season, 4,500 yards. He completed 77% of his passes, also a Oregon football record. Bo Nix is a very accurate passer. I think that speaks for itself, but I've got my concerns because, in my opinion, he's a check down Charlie. And for that reason, he is third in my Tier 2 QB rankings. I just can't shake this love I have for Michael Penix. He's my number 1. And then I go J.J. McCarthy, and then I go Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is your prototypical model of why did someone have such great numbers in the college but didn't translate to the NFL? Well, when your wide receivers are awesome and everyone's fast because they've got really cool Nike jerseys and you got a great home field crowd, sometimes you just need to throw a couple of dink and dunk passes and your star players can do the rest. That's the kind of sense I get from Bo Nix. I just don't have a good feeling about Bo Nix translating well to the pros due to the lack of precision downfield passing from him. But who do you think will end up being drafted by the Falcons? What's your gut telling you? Like, not who you want, but who do you think Atlanta is ultimately going to pull the trigger on? Scroll on down and give me your answer. Personally, I'm starting to think it's JJ. That elite processor comment, I just can't shake it. I know that's just one thing from Lance Zierlein, but it's another thing when Raheem Morris says that. When NFL GMs are saying that's what J.J. McCarthy does well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go, this could be someone Atlanta looks at very closely. A lot of it's very dependent on Michael Penix's injury reviews and remarks and overall update, but I'm just starting to think J.J., get yourself ready for J.J. Go watch some J.J. McCarthy highlights because he might be the next quarterback in Atlanta. Some other day 2 and day 3 quarterback targets. Michael Pratt out of Tulane, multi-year starter for the Big Green Wave. Joe Milton for Tennessee, an absolute cannon of an arm, can throw out orange 100 yards. Needs to work on some accuracy concerns, but one name to watch for. Spencer Rattler, I want nothing to do with. Ever since I watched QB1, he's a complete punk. I'm not interested. Jordan Travis out of Florida State. He's not getting probably enough attention as he deserves, but unfortunately, we think we all know why. Sam Hartman from Notre Dame. Speaking of QB1, I loved Sam Hartman in QB1, but he was not very good for Notre Dame this year. And that was supposed to be a big breakout year going from Wake Forest receivers to Notre Dame skilled players, and that leap was not made. And then Tua's little brother, Talia Tagovailoa. Ooh, tongue twister. So those are some other quarterbacks to watch for in days 2 and day 3 of the draft. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, shout out to Adam. Shout out to Adam for helping get this show off the ground today. All of your support does not go unnoticed. You're the man, Adam. Enjoy your Friday.